ADHD sections if you want to skip ahead to a specific thing you were looking for. Also, I am saying that this is study tips for people with ADHD, but really it's for everybody. I'm just tailoring it specific to things that have worked for me specifically, and also just because these things work for me doesn't mean they'll work for everyone, even if that person also has ADHD, if that makes sense. The last thing I want to say is sort of a disclaimer, is that just because I do certain things and I have ADHD or don't do certain things doesn't mean that you have ADHD or don't have ADHD just based on that. Like, that's something to figure out with you and a professional, you know. Okay, anyways, with that out of the way, I want to go ahead and explain some of the things that have worked for me. When I say I've always struggled in school, I don't mean I've always gotten bad grades, but I've always been trying to find out what works for me to minimize stress, to minimize the time it takes for me to do everything, and to maximize my retention and interest in the subjects as well. So, yeah, the first tip I have is, the first few tips I have are surrounded with, are based on picking classes. So, the few things I would say with picking classes is, pick classes that interest you. Like, if looking at the title of the class or the course description is like, makes you feel existential dread, you know, you probably don't want to be taking that class. You know, there's usually a variety of ways to get a certain credit, so find the way that seems the most appealing to you, even if it's not specific to whatever you're studying. Also, at times that work for you, like, don't just try to put things as early as possible if you don't do well in the mornings, if that makes sense. You know, when people used to give me advice, they would say something like, don't take 8 a.m. classes, which is like, fair if you're not a morning person, but do take 8 a.m. classes if that's your best time. Just kind of like pay attention to when you're most active, when you feel most capable of doing work, and then put your classes at those times. And then the last thing I would say in regards to picking classes is drop a class if you don't like the professor. I know that sounds a little bit extreme, and like you don't have to drop the class, but if you are in the first week of class or something like that, you know, the syllabus is really sus. I don't really know how else to say it. And it seems like, you know, either the professor is mean or unfair or scattered or, you know, whatever. Just, yeah, drop the class. I had a friend who dropped the class that I am currently in, and she had the right idea. You know, this guy was so disorganized, and it really affected my ability in this class to keep track of my deadlines and, you know, get things done, only because of the professor. And so you can always retake a class with a different teacher, you can always take a different class, but don't set yourself up to be unsuccessful over something as small as who's teaching the class. Okay, my next category of tips is related to note-taking. So, the first thing I will say is, take notes ahead of time. And again, this just works for me. But basically, I find that the way I learn best is through listening. And so I love to listen to lectures, but when I write during a lecture, it takes away from the listening. I'm not actually retaining any of what I'm writing. So what I do is usually lectures are based on a reading or something like that, the textbook. You know, there's usually some sort of other material along with the lecture. And I usually try to take notes on that ahead of time. Not just read it, but like take notes. notes and write down key points and definitions and stuff, and I may not retain it, especially if I just write down definitions. That's hardly sufficient for retention. But when I'm doing two things, when I'm seeing the material twice in two different ways, that is how I remember it. And that applies to everyone. That when you see the material in different ways, you're more likely to remember it. And for me, writing it and then hearing it is what works. But it may be that you want to listen to the lecture and then take notes, or you need to make up your own problems or whatever. But going through the material twice is my advice. The next thing I would say in regards to note-taking would be, so I take all my notes physically, but all of this obviously applies to tech. I mean, there is the debate, I guess, that taking notes physically is better for your retention, but honestly it just has to do with the muscle memory. So if you're writing on an iPad, I doubt that makes the difference. But typing generally is associated with lower retention when it comes to note-taking. But however you do note-taking, that's cool. I like to color code my notes, and not in a difficult way. It doesn't take much time. You don't want to add too much things that take more time to help you organize your time, if that makes sense. But basically I just have 3 colors. I'll do lilac for headings or different sections. I'll do green for definitions, and then I'll do pink for direct quotes or examples. And so if it'll be I don't know, art history, for example, and then the heading could be Roman architecture, so you would highlight that lilac and then write your bullet notes or whatever. And then you're defining what a transept is, and then you highlight that in green because that's a new vocabulary word related to that heading. And then you're writing about a specific Roman church, and then you write the name of the church, you would highlight that in pink. And that way when you're looking back through your notes or whatever, it's much easier to pick out things. And I also think it's just rereading your notes and going through the process of sorting. I just feel like that makes it easier for your brain to kind of categorize things, and again, better for retention. And then the last thing I would say about note-taking is to do what works for you in regards to the layout, the page layout. I think one of the biggest things I've noticed is that linear note-taking, as in starting at the top, going to the bottom, bullet points or paragraphs, is the typical way people take notes, or at least the way it's portrayed. But I think for a lot of people, including myself, that's not how I think. So at least for example, for this video, I took notes or made a script or whatever, but it's not linear. It's not point A, point B. It's like a mind map sort of thing. And so if you're more of a visual learner, for example, taking notes in a sort of mind map or web format, or adding pictures throughout your notes, adding graphs, whatever you do to make your notes more personalized to you. It doesn't have to be just bullet points. I think that would be really helpful. And then on the same in that same sort of thought, not everyone thinks the same and not everyone learns the same. And so sometimes assistive technology or online software specifically for learning is something that could be good. So I have a couple examples of this. I'm not obviously not sponsored, but I'm not necessarily recommending these, but I want to give an example of certain things that can help you. So there are 2 different programs one's called Otter, and the other's called Glean. And I can put these in the description, but these are both for recording lectures. So Otter would be transcribing a lecture in real time, and then you're able to go back and search for keywords. And then Glean doesn't transcribe but records lectures, and then you can flag it with preset like categories and label the different the sections you flagged. So if in the lecture they talk about an assignment that's going to be due, you can flag that, call it assignment. And yeah, so again, I can link those, but that's just one type of software that can be used if you have sort of a different learning style. And then another one is called Kurzweil, and that's like for doing readings, or like if you have to read a textbook or something. It's sort of for like reading out loud, is mainly what it's for. So yeah, you can put any PDF in there, any textbook in there, and it'll read it out loud. But also you can like export highlights. You can highlight different parts and export them into a notes document. So if you like taking notes on a textbook but you don't have a physical textbook, or you prefer online, that's something you can do. So yeah, so that's some stuff I have discovered in the realm of note-taking. And then I guess I would just add, because I forgot to say this before, in regards to doing notes at a time, but like there's no pressure to take notes. I know people like hammer on it, if that's the phrase, but harp on it, that's what it is, to take notes. But really, listening and watching the lecture is a way to learn. And if taking notes you find distracts you from that, really just don't. That's what I would say. Planning is the next category, and so I just wanted to show you a couple things in regards to planning. Everyone works differently, again, in this regard, and you want to take the time to decide what works for you and try a lot of different things. But one of the things with ADHD is that your time visualization is different, so it's harder to kind of plan out your day and picture like how long things take. You know, people with ADHD tend to grossly overestimate or underestimate how much time they have for something, or like until something happens. And so something you can do is like, so this is just something like this. It's a 24-hour type schedule, weekly and 24-hour, and this can help. Instead of just like a to-do list or a schedule, you can block out like literally every section of your day. So like, you know, your sleep, you can block out sleep, and then you can block out work, you can block out class, and you can see exactly when you have free time to study, take notes, hang out with your friends, your family, your kids, whatever. And put other things like that too. Basically just anything you have planned or need to prioritize, you can put it in your schedule. And something like that is really helpful to me, because I also have trouble kind of visualizing when things need to happen and how much time I have, you know. So that's like one thing you can do. And then there's another type of planning thing I have here. Would be like this kind of thing. So this would be like, you say your class and the at the top, and then due dates, and you basically for each class put things, you know, a paper, when a paper is due, a test or a project, and you know, put the name of the project and then the due date. This can also be color coded if you want to put certain colors for if it's in person, if it's a test, if it's a paper, you know, a group thing, anything like that, you can do that on there. And those things are really great tools, because you can make something like that in, you know, Excel or Word or whatever. Something that's personalized to you, to the amount of classes you have, to the amount of time you have, etc. So that's all I have in regards to planning and scheduling. Again, that's kind of something I'm still figuring out, but there's a lot of great apps and different ways you can plan your schedule, so really just find out what works for you. The next section of advice I would give is kind of a little bit more specific to people who have ADHD or something else that would sort of that makes school stuff harder. So, skip this section if you don't think that applies to you. But accommodations and school resources. It's less common in university to have accommodations, but that is something with the and this is specific to the US. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but there's the 504 section 504, which talks about I don't know, disability in schools and what schools need to offer or allow for, I guess, in regards to accommodations. And even if you think oh, I don't really know what I need, a lot of times there will be a specific office or department of your school that offers accommodations and will work with you kind of with what you need, because it's not just about deadline extensions and extra time on tests. You can get a lot more specified things, like asking for alternative materials kind of thing, like recorded lectures and stuff like that. And often teachers and whoever is doing the accommodations will have specific things that you might not have thought of. And then I guess also I would just say resources. Most schools, I would say all schools have some resources that make learning and studying easier, whether that be through the school. So that would be something like a tutoring center, so one-on-one tutoring, peer mentoring, certain things like that. Maybe a writing revision center. Sometimes they have course specific tutoring and help, or department specific tutoring and help. And I would say this applies to almost all universities. But then sometimes there's other types of resources, like clubs, like a math club or a study club or something, or a study group where you can go. So I would say if you can look at your school's website or flyers around your school and just look for resources, seek out help, seek out resources, especially when you have barriers in the way of learning. You kind of have to seek these things out, which sucks, obviously, and it's not really fair. But, there are those resources out there. You just kind of have to look for them. And then again, try everything and see what works for you. Okay. And then the last thing is just general tips. I think these are all also really good. I just didn't know what categories to put them in. So, okay, let's start. This is kind of also ADHD specific, but again, works for everyone. It's called body doubling, which is basically that if a task seems daunting or hard to do or hard to focus on, if you sit down and, well, not sit down literally, but if you decide to do it with someone or multiple other people, it can make things a lot easier. So if you have a roommate or a partner or a family member or something like that, someone else who needs to work on something, and it doesn't have to be the same thing at all, but then you could do it together. So two people doing homework, or someone cleaning and someone doing homework, or doing work from a computer, you know what I mean? So you could do all those things together, which makes it easier to focus. And then, but if you don't have someone, you're like, oh, what do I do? Body doubling. For me, what works is doing a study with me video. So just putting on in the background someone else studying. I like to watch Pomodoro method videos, and I can link that in the description too. Or just put on ASMR in the background, something non-distracting. So maybe not like a role play where you're invested in the plot, but typing ASMR, whatever, which can make you feel less alone, which can make it easier to focus. So if you have like a week ahead of you of work, try to do as much as you can now, as in like before the deadline. I wanted to say it like this instead of don't procrastinate, because everyone says don't procrastinate, and it's like, I know, I don't want to. But basically it's just kind of like, if you say, oh, I'm gonna do as much now, you front load your work. That way throughout the week you have less and less to do. And that way if you don't finish something when you said you were gonna do it, like, oh, I said I was gonna do this paper Monday and I didn't get to it, you still have the rest of the week to do it, rather than waiting until that Thursday night. And then feeling like if you can't do it, you don't have any time left. You know what I mean? So even if you're gonna procrastinate, try to get as much done as you can. As early as you can, if that makes sense. Similar to that, give yourself a sort of like give up cutoff. So, if you had kind of a bad week for doing schoolwork and you didn't really do much, if it's something where it's a lot of points, you know, you want to catch up, obviously, but sometimes you just have to say, like, screw it, you know, like, if the stress or the guilt or whatever is weighing on you so much that you are not able to go forward, then you make yourself a sort of cutoff where you say, okay, I wasn't doing work last week, I didn't feel inspired, I didn't get anything done, whatever, I'm making a cutoff, I'm leaving that all behind, whatever I didn't do, and now I have a fresh start and I'm going forward. I guess rather than getting bogged down by feeling like how much you didn't do and thinking about how much you didn't do and feeling like you have a lot of catching up, you know, you give yourself that clean start. Because oftentimes for me, I never end up doing those things anyway, but I'll feel guilty about it, so sometimes it's better to just kind of cut off that dead branch, you know what I mean? Ask for help from anyone, really, if you're struggling with some sort of assignment. A lot of people have the knowledge, the inspiration, the volition to help you. You know, you may even mention it to a family member, friend, partner, whatever, classmate, obviously, and kind of say you're struggling with something, because even if they aren't able to help you with all aspects of it, they may know a little bit about the topic, they may know about citations, editing, they may have had to do something similar, so ask for help in all places. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. In fact, it's one of the best things you can do to help yourself. This was just a small one for people who aren't in school yet, or as in aren't in higher education, that just consider community college or a smaller college. For me, this, again, ADHD specific, and part of my ADHD diagnosis kind of had like things to think about, or things that would help me, and one of them was go to a school with small class sizes. And that's just because community colleges often have a lot more resources for people of different walks of life, I guess, people with different challenges and different skills and things like that. And again, small class sizes means that teachers can give you more one-on-one, respond to emails faster, whatever, like, that's just something to consider. And then, let's see, I had something. Oh, the last tip I had is that perfection is the enemy of good. If you, oh, this is not the last thing, I just thought of something else, but perfection is the enemy of good. If you think you need to write the perfect paper, make the perfect presentation, whatever, it can really feel daunting, it can really feel like impossible. So sometimes all you have to do is be like, alright, I have to write a paper, that's it, I'm gonna meet the requirements, like, I guess maybe do the bare minimum, and I'm not saying in all cases, you know, you wanna try, you wanna learn, but sometimes when it's something that it's really hard to do, a paper you've been really putting off, just do the requirements, do the bare minimum. Oftentimes when I sit down to do that, I end up getting invested and focused and doing more than the bare minimum. But I think sometimes all it takes is that switch in your brain to be like, I'm just gonna do the bare minimum, and that's enough to make you sit down and actually do it instead of feeling like you can't do it perfectly. You know what I mean? Gee, I said there was one more thing, and now I'm like, I can't remember. Let's see. I was saying perfection is the enemy of good. Alright, I had to like stop and think about it. I think the last thing I was gonna say was just take breaks when you're studying. If you do something like a Pomodoro method video, the breaks are incorporated, but you know, you never want to sit down and like work for 6 hours straight. You know, you're not gonna get the same amount out of it, and you're gonna feel a lot worse if you don't split that up with breaks. But I think that's all my tips. Obviously, I'm still learning this myself, and a lot of what I said is just personalize it. But I hope my tips helped. I just think I wish you the best in whatever you're doing, in getting things done and getting through work and school, and through all of it, make sure to take care of yourself and reward yourself and feel proud about everything you've done so far and everything you have overcome so far. And yeah, and I, ASM Ray, will be with you through all of it. Well, yeah, that's it. So see you next week.